Hello everyone, and welcome to BodyShop News Australia's first webinar, ADAS, Calibrating Body Shop Repairs. My name is Albert Malik, and I'm the Managing Editor at BodyShop News. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors, without whom this event wouldn't have happened. A big thank you to 3M, Anest Iwata, Gutmann Solutions, ProSpot, and Sherwin Williams Automotive Finishes. And now before we begin, I'd like to go through a little bit of housekeeping. To ensure that you can experience this webinar properly, we do suggest you use a laptop or a desktop computer to participate, and make sure that you're connected over a high-speed internet connection. Try to use Firefox or Google Chrome to watch this webinar, as you'll get the best experience that way. There shouldn't be a problem if you're using Apple Safari or Microsoft Edge, but if you do have any issues, just give Chrome or Firefox a try. If at any point the audio or the video gets stuck or you have problems, try refreshing your browser too. In Windows, you can press F5 on your keyboard, and on macOS, you can press Command R to refresh. Now, on the right side of your screen, you should be able to see a white pane with a set of tabs. If you can't see this pane, just click on the icon in the bottom right corner. You should first see the Chats tab. Feel free to chat with us and with any of the other attendees in there. In the Questions tab, you can post questions, any questions that you'd like to ask the panel, just post them in there. They will become visible to the panel during our Q&A session, which we're planning to have at the end of the webinar. You can also upvote any of the questions. If somebody else happens to ask your question first, you can upvote that question, and we'll see the most popular questions showing, and we'll endeavor to get them answered. Finally, we're also going to do some live polls later in the polls tab. So they'll appear during the course of the webinar as they come up. So take a look there when the time comes. All right, so let's get started. I'd like to first welcome Michel Malik, publisher of BodyShop News and moderator of our webinar today. Michel?
Thank you, Albert. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to have you here, and I'm very proud to be with you as your moderator today, explaining what's happening throughout this webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I've been around this industry a little bit. I've been for about 30, 40 years as in the industry as a moderator, as a publisher of a magazine, as a writer, and for the last 20 or something years with BodyShop News. Now, I'm a car fan. I love cars. I collect cars. I repair cars. We have our own little body shop, BodyShop News, and we do all of these things. But not to talk about me, let me talk about my co-panelists today. So today with us is Robert Snook. Robert is our one of the panelists with us today. He is a genuine collision industry fan with more than 35 years experience. He's a global speaker and a conference moderator for IBIS. He's a group director of MG Cannon, which is a multi-award winning UK MSO body shop. Principal at Business Success Global, collision industry business coaching and training. He's globally respected. He's previously held senior management director and business owner level corporate in corporate and private companies. Welcome, Robert.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Michel.
Next is Andrew Marsh. For those of you who know Andrew as one of our writers in our magazine, he is, what shall I say? He's a mechanical engineer. He's involved in design, development, and project management. He has over many, many years with car manufacturers. He's also a founding member of the Auto Industry Consulting. He's launched the Ezi-Methods in 2012, and that covers nearly 1,000 models today. He's also previously the automotive engineering manager at Thatcham Research. He's very much sought after globally as a speaker for the collision repair industry, and he's a regular contributor to BodyShop News magazines. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon to you too. And also on our panel today is Adrian Parks. Adrian is our specialist expert, if you want, on ADAS. He is, what can I tell you? He is the man who's founded, if you want, the ADAS Solutions in Australia, which is established in Brisbane to offer ADAS calibration training and consultation and technical support. He's got an excellent understanding of cutting-edge automotive technology. His background is very much unique and varied. He's worked with prestigious, highly regarded global vehicle manufacturers like Ferrari, Mercedes, Maserati, even Rolls-Royce, amongst others. And he consistently strives to raise awareness and standards in the industry. Welcome, Adrian. Nice to have you on board.
Thanks. Great to be here. Hello, everyone.
Now, if I can just explain to you what's happening today on our webinar. So we are going to talk about ADAS, essentially. And we're going to break down our webinar into 3 sections. Essentially, the first segment is going to be, what is ADAS? How does it affect the repair operation? And what do body shops need to manage it? So I'm going to throw it out to Andrew to start with. But before that, let me explain to you how the whole situation works. So Andrew will come up with the first section. We will do a live poll whereby we give you an option to tell us what your thoughts are. And then there'll be the chance for you to ask questions in the questions column. And then we will have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar today. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start with the first segment. And the first segment is, what is ADAS and how does it work? And it's all up to Andrew now. So we'll let him go ahead and do his bit.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to take a quick look at a typical vehicle, and I'm going to describe the ADAS layout. So we'll just look at that. Here it comes. So if we look at the front end of the vehicle, typically we will have surround views. So that could be one camera in the front bumper, one camera in the boot lid, the trunk lid, or tailgate, or bumper at the rear, and one camera in each door mirror. So front, side, rear. Going back to the front, we could have 4 ultrasonic sensors as usual, pointing forwards, so 2.5 meter range, 2 pointing sideways at 4.5 meters range. Sticking with the front, we could have a radar with a range of somewhere in the region of 150 to 200 meters. We could also have 2 wide field radars pointing sideways. This vehicle doesn't have that. And it could also have a solid state LiDAR sensor pointing forwards, again with similar range to the forward facing radar. At the rear, mimicking the front, we could have 4 rearward facing radars, typically 2.5 meter range. Again, 2 side facing ultrasonic sensors with a 4.5 meter range. 2 radar modules behind the bumper skins facing sideways or rearwards. And the real point about all of this, oh, I forgot, the crowning glory is the camera that is usually located up behind the windscreen, which has a range of circa 0.5 kilometer, but in reality is closer to 250 meters. What puts this all together is that the vehicle is communicating with all of these sensors. These sensors are not standalone. They are networked, and they are all part of the driver awareness system, ADAS, and they also, on some vehicles, can communicate with the outside world. So if we're working on one end of the vehicle, we have to make sure that the system is working properly, and it may affect other areas of the vehicle. Thank you.
Okay, that's awesome, Andrew. Thank you so much for that good explanation for us. Now, I'm going to quiz you guys on this thing. You're not going to get away with it, as you can imagine. Andrew, we start with you. How common are these ADAS systems, and what range of vehicles have ADAS fitted now?
So we have it started growing from way back in about sort of 2002, 2003 with forward-facing equipment in tiny numbers. It then became a legal requirement in North America about halfway through the last decade. It became a legal requirement in Europe in the beginning of this decade. So it has become common. It is now forward-facing equipment is common right the way through the market. So newer vehicles, more often than not, will have some form of ADAS fitted. And so if we look at a park over the last 5 years, you're going to find a fair smattering, particularly in the middle to upper range. And I suppose the real news is that in a vehicle, in a single vehicle, it could be equipped with some or all of these systems. It isn't a given that it always has the same system. And that particularly applies to the middle to upper range vehicles.
Okay, that sounds very good. Now I'm going to ask Adrian, because Adrian is the man who sort of plays with this thing all the time. Adrian, if so many vehicles have got ADAS, what choices will repairers have? And do they have choices?
Yeah, ultimately the repairer has two choices, and that is either to handle the ADAS system repairs themselves in-house, or to subcontract it out to a specialist. So there are two choices ultimately.
Okay, so Robert, you're the man with the many shops around this. How important is it to identify ADAS on a vehicle coming in to repair?
It's absolutely critical, Michel. It's one of the absolute core parts of a repair process today. It starts off with really your integrity as a repairer, your integrity with the customer, with the insurance company, is to really understand the process and communicate your expertise. Obviously, it's the only way to guarantee there's going to be a safe repair, and you as a business won't have any future liability once that vehicle goes back on the road.
Okay, while you're with me, so when should it be done? I mean, when should this be done, and who should do it, and how do we do that?
It should be done up front, right before you even get the vehicle into the workshop, and then that understanding should be built into the estimate. It's the responsibility of the assessor, the engineer, the VDA to get that correct repair method out, look at it diligently, and ensure that repair method is incorporated into the estimate. That should also be recorded. It's a point that some people miss. That investigation into the ADAS should be recorded at that point and documented for a later audit.
All right, Andrew, what is happening in established ADAS markets? How do they control and how do they manage this?
Okay, I think I would say it's a mix. Most of the forward-thinking shops, and there's a lot, have invested, are managing their traffic. There are still people who stick their fingers in the ears and say, no, it's not happening, or hang the sensors from the wires as they're doing the work and put it all back together and think it'll all work. The systems are way smarter than us, so they know when they've been removed from a harness or removed from an assembly is still connected to the harness. It's a long way round. I think it's a mixed bag, but we are moving, UK and Europe is moving to a greater understanding, and I think it's more common that a body shop will try and keep the work in-house and do recalibration work themselves rather than put it to third parties.
Okay, thanks for that. Now, Adrian, last but not least, there are no specific ADAS repair standards or insurance policy wordings. So what will happen if a body shop doesn't have the capability to repair and recalibrate ADAS properly?
So the lack of capability doesn't absolve the repairer from responsibility. So the repairer is still ultimately responsible for repairing the vehicle correctly to OE standards. So even if the repairer doesn't have the capability, they should still be aware. And that awareness then should lead to that vehicle either being subcontracted out to a specialist or a dealer for repair. But ultimately that vehicle should be repaired correctly, calibrated if necessary, before it's returned to the road.
Okay, thank you. We've got to have a live poll now, so we'll just get you, the audience, if you be kind enough to go to your right columns, you'll find there's a column saying live poll, and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you 3 choices with the live poll here, and essentially the question is, how do you rate your business capability and understanding of ADAS? So you're either very confident in your ability to calibrate, or you have limited confidence in your ability, or you're not confident at all in your ability to calibrate any ADAS repairs. If you don't mind going there and just logging onto the live poll and give us your ideas, and we'll give you about 30 seconds to do this, and then we'll come back to our second section. Meanwhile, also, if you have any questions to ask, please go to the question column and put your questions through. We'll get to them eventually. All right. Let's have a look at the polls just to have a quick idea before we just go away. All right. So far, the polls, how are we looking? Okay. All right. So essentially, the polls are showing 46% of we're not confident in our ability to calibrate any ADAS repairs. 36% with limited confidence, and 14% are the only one who are very confident in their ability to calibrate any ADAS repairs. Wow. Adrian, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that's a fair score for here in Australia, at least. And I think we also need to factor in there when we talk about all ADAS repairs. So even that 14%, are they really confident in repairing all systems presented to them today?
Okay. Robert, you're a man with many shops, even though you're in the UK. What are your thoughts on these figures compared to, say, in the UK now?
Well, in the UK, the car park of ADAS vehicles is quite high now. Around 6 million vehicles in the UK today with ADAS on the roads, out of a car park of about 38 million, which is about 15-16%. But of course, if you're a serious body shop and you primarily repair vehicles 1 to 3 years old, it could already be as much as 25 to 40% of your target car park that is ADAS equipped. So to have no confidence in the ability would already be causing you massive problems to manage ADAS repairs. I think what that poll shows me is that 85%, 8.5 out of every 10 body shops are saying that they don't have confidence in their ability. So there is clearly an awareness. The first part of any solution is just being aware of the problem. So in a way, we're aware and we know now how we can go forward and take the steps we need to take, which again, we can talk about later on this webinar.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to move on and we'll continue with our webinar, and then we'll go into our second section. Our second section is, how does ADAS affect the repair operation? And that is a big question. And I'm going to start with Adrian, because Adrian is the guy who does a lot of these repairs. Adrian, please.
Yeah, so what we have now is an additional and somewhat potentially complex addition to that repair journey that we didn't have a few years ago. And really primarily it is all revolving around awareness as we speak today. So when the vehicle is presented to the repairer, the first step is to be aware. So we have to record and identify what ADAS is fitted to the vehicle that is in front of us. So that's where the awareness comes in. We need to make ourselves aware. We need to seek out training for that awareness. So we need to understand how to identify and how to locate the various ADAS systems on the vehicle. Then we need to document that and also then decipher which systems are affected by the damage that is presented. That then leads us on to the planning phase. So then we need to plan for the repair journey. So again, what was fitted, what is impacted. So therefore then what parts do I need? Is a calibration required throughout the journey? If that is the case, do we do that in-house or do we subcontract it out? If we're going to subcontract it out, then we need to proactively plan that, because if we're going to subcontract it, it might be 2 or 3 weeks booking or lead time. If we're going to do it in-house, we need to consider the tooling that is required, and are we willing to invest in the tooling that is required, and do we have the information available to us, so the repair methods or instructions from the OE and the necessary information to carry out that repair and calibration. That then takes us on to sort of the end of the repair, and it's a case of, when do I calibrate? How do I calibrate? Do I have the environment to calibrate in my business? Do I have the space that is required for calibration? So it's all about really awareness today as we speak, and then from that awareness, we'll grow the capability.
Okay, that gives us a good idea. I've got a few questions for everyone here. I'm going to start with. Let's walk through a typical repair journey to see how ADAS affects the repair operation. Robert, first, customer contact. How can the customer help us understand what is needed?
Well, the customer has an even more important role to play now with ADAS-equipped vehicles than they did with previous accidents, and that is because ADAS can't actually communicate to us that it doesn't function properly, it's not working properly. What you need to do is sit that customer down and talk to them about the circumstances of the accident, the changes they've noticed in the operations of the car. They have a resource of data that they can provide you to let you know about the sort of things that you need to check, and that will help substantiate operations that are needed, help you cross-check against the manufacturer repair method. It also gives you another sort of soft sell opportunity where you can really communicate your thoroughness, your diligence, your expertise to the customer. They've got to trust you that you have the capability to repair this technology on their vehicle, the second most expensive thing they're ever going to buy. So it would be a real wasted opportunity if you didn't sit down with the customer and really talk to them about the accident, show your care and your understanding, but also gather the data from them that they will have unknowingly from driving that car since the accident.
Okay, that's fair enough. Andrew, sourcing the correct repair methods. What are correct repair methods and what aren't correct repair methods?
Okay, so the big thing, having done the investigation on the vehicle in front of in the shop, is to realize that each vehicle is unique, and that in a particular model series, from the very time it's first made to the very last production model, there could be revisions in the sensor system. So we cannot assume, having dealt with a vehicle before, that we know that vehicle inside out. So the first thing to do is scoot around and identify where the things are, and then the methods themselves. So the primary source of all information is from the vehicle manufacturer. So there are two routes, or at least two routes. One would be to go direct to the vehicle manufacturer onto their website and download the information about the preparation for, or rather, fit and remove of the device, and then the preparation for calibration and the calibration procedure. And that would include associated software, perhaps. There are other sources, people like Thatcham and Ezi-Methods, who provide aggregated information. It is vehicle manufacturer information, but it's a simple one-stop place rather than have to hunt through different manufacturer websites. And what's not a good idea is really to take out-of-date information. I think the information that has come from left field, from maybe a chat room, and sometimes these are a good source of information, but really the best source of information is the stuff that comes from the vehicle manufacturer. That's the most up-to-date and the most accurate. And if we think about it, the vehicle manufacturer has the liability in providing us with correct information. If we choose not to use that, then we've created a new risk.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Adrian?
Can I just add in something there? Also, just to add into Andrew's comments there, we shouldn't also assume that just because we have a vehicle here, for example, in Australia, that the repair information and the specifications are the same as the same model in other parts of the world. We have different build locations with different componentry and different specifications. So we should also pay heed to that too.
That's a good one. Now, while you're still here, Adrian, the estimate, what are the important considerations when compiling an estimate?
So primarily, it's again back to identification. So we now need the estimator to be trained to be able to identify these systems on the vehicle. The estimator is often the first person to see the vehicle, the person who contacts the customer, the person who has that first impression of the vehicle. So identification is key here. Identification will then lead to the repair requirements. So, you know, we've identified the systems on the vehicle and which systems are implicated in the repair. So then we can start to make a map, if you like, a roadmap of the repair requirements. Do components need to be replaced? If they do they require complex coding and programming? Does the component require to be calibrated at all? Not all sensors require calibration. Some are quite simply rather dumb and plug and play. Do we need special tooling for that calibration? And if so, do we have that special tooling, or is it out of our scope? And again, do we need to subcontract it? Are there any additional costs there that we need to factor in at this early stage during the estimate? And could there potentially be hidden costs through the journey that we need to flag? So really, it all stems from identification and understanding.
That's very thorough. Robert, I'm going to ask you something, but please tell us what you think.
Adrian, fantastic answer, absolutely perfect. Just wanted to add something from our experience of ADAS repairs, Michel, and that is that the customers, the insurance companies, they do not pay for truth. They do not pay for your opinion on what is required. They pay on evidence. So they will happily pay on evidence. So you have to provide the evidence from the work Adrian's just explained if you want to get paid for those operations.
Even sometimes on evidence they don't want to pay. We know that. That's insurance company. Robert, while we're talking, and you're talking about evidence and paying, authorization, what challenges have body shops experienced at the authorization stage, now that you're mentioning that?
Yeah, it's a question that's come up from the audience already, and thanks to Jeff Smith for asking the question. He wanted to know about whether insurance companies are aware of the additional complexities around ADAS repairs, and in our experience, no, not always they're not. The training and the education of some insurance engineers has not kept pace with the technology in the vehicle and the awareness of that technology in the body shops. So very often at authorization stage, you come across a battle with the insurer engineer where they just don't not want to pay you purely. They just don't understand what you're trying to explain to them is required. And again, you have to provide the evidence in the repair method and the data for them to understand that. So I think they haven't really always kept pace with training, some more than others, of course, but there are definitely challenges arising with the insurance engineers when you're trying to get these things authorized. The other thing I would say, of course, is the engineers rely on the contracts they've been given to police you on, to audit you against. And those contracts haven't always kept pace with the technology either. They're still into a contract that was delivered pre some of these ADAS technologies arriving in the cars. So therefore it's not in there. But these are typically the challenges we get, Michel.
Obviously you need to train the assessors. They need to know what they're doing in the first place. Andrew, parts. Do we need to do anything different with part processes? And if so, what?
I think the short answer is no, because we're in the process of identifying what's where. That would feed into the parts ordering system. The only rider I would put on that is that radar modules in particular are sensitive to being dropped. So, and the drop can be sort of less than half a meter. So they need to be treated with respect. They may have failed during the impact, even if outwardly they appear to be fine. So we need to think about that occasionally we've done the whole job. We've redressed the vehicle, finished it, recalibrated it, and it won't recalibrate because possibly one or more module has been damaged in the impact at the beginning. The pre-scan should have picked that up, but yeah, that can happen. I think otherwise, the parts situation is relatively straightforward.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go back to Adrian. Pre-check. Okay, so when we do the pre-check before that, do we need any other form of pre-check, or do we just get on with it?
No, I think even if we're a repairer who isn't involved in ADAS or isn't willing to embark on that ADAS calibration and repair journey, maybe we don't want to invest, we should still be pre-scanning the vehicle. So another pre-check we should be doing as a matter of course, and I would expect everybody to be doing now, is a pre-scan on every vehicle that comes through that door. How else can we find if there are any pre-existing fault codes that could pop up and bite us later on in the repair? Again, use your senses. Have we got any pre-existing warning lights in the instrument cluster that we can observe? Can we identify any bent or unserviceable components, such as mounting brackets, early on in the process? You know, all too often we find that we're presented with vehicles for calibration only to find that we are, you know, pulling bumper bars back off again to replace a bracket, and a bracket that may be ex-Japan or ex-Korea and has now added another 8 weeks to the repair of that vehicle. So there are a number of pre-checks that we can do there. We can't just assume that a look around the vehicle will suffice.
Thank you. Robert, the repair process, does ADAS change the way the technician approaches the repairs?
Yes, definitely. The technician needs to approach the repair on a pure case-by-case basis. As a simple example, perfectly repairable damage to a front bumper, you may be able to repair that if the damage is well away from any sensors and doesn't affect the operation of those sensors. But that same damage near a sensor wouldn't be repairable. You would have to replace the bumper with the genuine part. So you can't just take it that crack or that damage is repairable. You have to factor in the location of the sensors. They have to look at a complete holistic approach to the repair, Michel, because the damage is not visible with an ADAS system. So really it comes down to some simple steps. Identify all areas on the vehicle where the ADAS is present and make sure it's recorded, as I said earlier, and then make sure that all of those operations are in the job card. If they're not, go back to the VDA, to the assessor, the estimator, and make sure those operations that are required are added in to the repair. Make sure you follow the manufacturer methods. Don't just flick through them willy-nilly. Make sure you're reading them and understand them in detail before you commence the repair. Then, of course, carry out the repair, the alignment, the recalibration. But that repair must be carried out by a currently competent technician. It's not just a case of allocating the next repair to the next technician that needs a job. With an ADAS repair, it needs to be someone who is trained, certified, and competent to repair that vehicle.
All right, that's a good idea. Now, recalibration. Adrian, what best practices are there, and what mistakes do others make?
Best practices really are coming back to Robert's point there, and that is, you know, adhering to the manufacturer's recommendations and guidelines as far as calibrations go. And we're all human, and we're all guilty sometimes of overlooking that. And as Robert just said, flicking through it and not really paying attention to it. A good process in place is a good place to start for best practice. You need a good, solid process in place that everybody adheres to. So pre-calibration checks are often overlooked. You know, inspect the vehicle, tyres, tyre pressures, ride heights, etc. Is there anything there that could cause a failed calibration or a poor quality calibration? Environmental factors are another big issue that are often not factored in. It's something that the industry's never had to deal with, is environmental factors. So, you know, it's imperative that we have the correct environmental factors for these calibrations. We need the correct space. It needs to be flat, level, no lighting issues, no shadow, no shade. So, you know, it is difficult at times. Mistakes others make, failure to prepare has got to be one of our number one mistakes. Failure to prepare, lack of information, lack of training and fundamental understanding, a lack of understanding of the nature of the job, thinking that the job is just a simple, you know, placement of either a reflector or a target and just press tick or press go. That's not always the case, you know, and often not the case, particularly on an accident damaged vehicle where it's what we would class as a dirty calibration, where things are potentially bent, damaged, broken. There's a lot of diagnostics in the background with this. It's not a job for the faint-hearted at times.
We actually see all these diagnostics in the background behind you.
Exactly.
Of equipment out there.
Yep.
All right, Andrew. Obviously, we do all these checks and everything, and then at the end, there's a road test. If the calibration has been done, do we really still need to do a road test?
Yes, it's a good idea because anecdotally in our business, we see a regular stream of requests from body shops who went through the motions, did everything they thought was right. It didn't work out. The vehicle gets handed back to the customer, who doesn't know necessarily what's on the vehicle, but they do know how it sounds and what it does when they drive. And they pick it up. And that's embarrassing because the customer's effectively telling the body shop they haven't finished the job. So a road test is the catch-all. It makes sure that, yeah, we believe this vehicle is fully functional. When it's handed over, it's less likely the customer's going to come back with a concern that the ADAS is not working.
Okay, that's a good idea. Now I'm going to go to Adrian. Quality control. What are the final points to consider before signing off the repair?
So some of that, I think, is coming back to what Andrew's just iterated there. And I guess number one is that all data and documentation has been captured and stored and is auditable. And again, I think Robert mentioned that earlier. So everything that we do along this journey needs to be documented, it needs to be captured, and needs to be stored for potential future evidence. Again, coming back to what Andrew's just said, in my opinion, it's imperative that the ADAS system has been thoroughly tested, and that is a road test simply, and is 100% operational, and then reinstated before presenting it back to the customer. Even if that vehicle came in with some of the ADAS features turned off or the sensitivity turned down, we'll still reinstate all of the ADAS features, and it's then up to the customer to turn them back off or turn the sensitivity down. And then finally, I guess, is the final scan. So that final very last scan of the job has been completed, and again is backed up and it's captured, and no fault codes exist.
Okay, I'm going to go back again to the road test. Robert, I'm sorry, you had your hand up and I just didn't see it very well until after I told Adrian to go. You wanted to say something about the road test?
Yeah, firstly, to endorse what Andrew said, road tests are still absolutely critical. Just because the ADAS has been recalibrated, there's still not a 100% guarantee in all cases that it is working exactly as it was when it left the factory. So a road test is the only way to do that. The point I was going to add to what Andrew said was make sure the road test is a very deliberate route of a suitable condition and length. It's no more just a pop round the corner and back again. You really need to think about designing a road test route that picks up all of these hazards and will give you the best and most assured way of checking the ADAS is working. Don't just take it to the nearest road because the traffic's not as bad that way. Make sure you turn the opposite way where it's really going to be tested. You'll get a vastly different result sometimes.
Robert, stay there while you're there. I'm going to ask you about the handover, because you do that a lot in the shop. Sort of do we do a normal handover, or is there anything else that we can do when there's a bit of a ADAS repair?
Well, it's something the industry is not very good at the best of times, but ADAS again once brings this into real focus. Michel, why would we have all of this expertise, skill and care to repair a customer's vehicle, and then at the end of all of that work we just hand them the key, wave them out the door and hope they remember us in 3 days or 30 years when they have their next accident? I don't understand why we do that as an industry. With technology like ADAS, if you've done the first bit properly about the first contact, what an ideal opportunity to sit down with the customer, talk them through what you've done and how their vehicle is safe again. Why not have a documented, published road test route so you can show them where you went on road test and what you did? Furthermore, in our body shops, in MG Cannon, we have branded wallets that we give the customer, and these branded wallets contain signed guarantees and certificates inside. So you have one for four-wheel alignment geometry, you have one for ADAS recalibration, you have one for a lifetime guarantee, you have a whole series of them. You put the inserts inside the branded wallet relative to that repair. What a great way for you to communicate to the customer that you delivered your promises and they are going to be safe if lightning does strike twice. And then guess what? They're going to go out and speak to their social circle, their friends and family and connections that drive cars like they do that also have ADAS. And all of a sudden you start building this whole unpaid sales force that recommends you for ADAS repairs without ever asking for a penny of commission from your body shop.
Fair enough. That's a very good answer. Now, not all repairers are doing this in-house. So some are outsourcing their calibration needs. So what are the benefits and challenges of in-house calibration versus subcontract to dealer versus mobile and even remote ADAS recalibration providers. I'm going to ask you, the three of you, very quickly, please, because we don't have all afternoon. Robert, could we start with you, please?
The sort of things that you have to consider, the benefits and challenges. Obviously, with the benefits of subcontract means there's no upfront reinvestment for you, but you subcontract to somebody, so you still have a responsibility to make sure that they are capable, that their equipment is calibrated. So, for example, if you're subcontracting it to a third party, you should make sure you have copies of their insurance that's live and annual, copies of their calibration certificates for their ramps. Make sure that they're providing you evidence for the job pack of things like ride height that Adrian said. A lot of people miss ride height setting before they carry out these tests. And then really deciding, again, if you can really trust them to do that calibration correctly as you. There's no point you doing the rest of the repair to manufacturer's methods if you then just subcontract somebody who doesn't do that in reality. So you have to weigh the benefits and challenges. It's not your get out of jail free card, it's your get in jail card if you're not careful. So there is no right answer, but all three of those options need to be considered equally before you decide what's right for your business.
All right, thank you, Robert. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that one? Again, very briefly, please.
Absolutely. I just want to pick up on what Adrian talked about a while ago, and Robert too, and that is in terms of risk. Are we able to repair all vehicles? And let's assume we've decided to invest in some sort of equipment, and there's a lot to choose from. And it can be that we reach a point where we're going to take on a repair that we're not equipped to deal with. And then that's a question of strategy. But that could be the point where we want to take it because it leads to another piece of business. So it's choosing how we're going to cover our market, whether we're going to go for 100% coverage, which is difficult. That would mean a mix perhaps of own equipment and subcontracting, or whether we calculate that actually certain vehicles we're not going to bother with because we know others in the area can, and it's not in our business interest to do so.
All right, okay. Adrian, have you got something to say about this one? I know what you're going to tell us. They're going to tell them, send them to you.
No, I think realistically, I think I'd close it on something that we've overlooked maybe a little bit, and that is skill. And that is that here in Australia, we don't have MET technicians. So typically a smash repairer consists of painters and panel beaters. So we don't have somebody in the workshop commonly that has the diagnostic skill to be able to do this. And contrary to popular belief, it's not just a case of standing up a target or a reflector and pressing a button. It's often far more complex than that and far more challenging. And you need to ask yourself whether or not you have the skill set to be able to complete these calibrations and these repairs.
All right, that's a good answer. Now I'm going to go to a live poll. Obviously, and the live poll is what is your biggest concern regarding ADAS in your current repair operations? Is it the equipment? Do I need to invest in new equipment to do this? Is it the training? My team does not have the required skills or certification? Or is it the information? I can't get access to the repair information I need. So please go to your poll column and if you just give us an idea as to what your thoughts are, and then we can go from there on. Okay, I'm going to have a quick look at the polls and see how we're looking. And so your polls are open already. Okay, sorry, the polls have just opened up now. Oh, I'm just seeing them now. Okay, so let's have a look. I'm not quite sure if the polls are published. Albert, are the polls published yet?
I can see them, Michel.
Oh, you can see them. I don't know why I can't see them. That's all right. So it must be something to do with my screen here.
Do you want me to just highlight the answers so that you can carry on?
Yes, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the result for you, Michel, is firstly with training. My team does not have the required skills and certifications, 43%. Equipment, I need to invest in new equipment to do this, 30%. Information, I cannot get access to the repair information I need, 26%.
Okay, so thank you for that. I can just see it now. It's just popped up as you spoke. It must have got scared a bit of you. Just opened up the screen. So, yeah, we don't have the required skills and certification is the big thing, obviously, and the equipment and then the information. Gentlemen, obviously, as usual, I'll ask you, what are your thoughts on this one? Robert, can we start with you?
I think it's really interesting that there's three relatively consistent answers, Michel. All three have equal importance and are of equal concerns. We see this all around the world with our IBIS events. These three things always come up in the local markets with their concerns around ADAS. It comes down to training equipment and information everywhere around the world. And it's interesting that that's been replicated in Australia.
All right, Adrian, you're the man who's in the deep end with this thing. Are you surprised?
Not at all. Not at all. It's a bit of a minefield. You know, there are no standards here in Australia. There's a distinct lack of training, particularly from state to state, and COVID hasn't helped with that. Equipment is a bit of a minefield. You know, there's a lot of equipment out there, and a lot of people don't do their due diligence before purchasing. And information here in Australia, we still can't access a lot of information. It's still not available to us, unlike it is in the Northern Hemisphere. So that is a major challenge. I think that's a bigger challenge than was just reflected.
Okay. Andrew, did you want to say something on that?
Just to quickly say that this picks up again on what Adrian was talking about with diagnostics, accessing the vehicle electronically, that it's not just ADAS. This is much bigger business opportunity than ADAS. ADAS is what we're talking about. That's what is our immediate concern. It's right and proper. We consider it. But once we begin to acquire those skills can reach far further into the rest of the vehicle.
Okay. All right. Well, that gives us a good idea. Gentlemen, we're going to move on to our third part of the segment today, and that is what do I need to do to be able to manage ADAS in my body shop? I'm going to let Robert talk about this thing because he's the man with the biggest body shops around here. Can you give us an idea, Robert? Can you answer that question, please?
Yes, Michel, of course. Well, there's really three types of calibration that you need to consider. There's static calibration there with the white vehicle in it. There's dynamic calibration you can see from the street scene, or there's the adaptive sensor type calibration you can see there in the grey vehicle on the top right. And then you need a plan for all three. It was interesting in a very recent study that was carried out that 48% of drivers now realise that windscreen sensors can affect the performance of sensors in bumpers and that they need calibrating as well. The same study showed that 78% of drivers now fully understand that an effective ADAS helps reduce the risk of accidents. But however, the big red flag was 80% of the drivers surveyed believe that an ineffective ADAS or a poorly calibrated ADAS will warn them with some sort of warning light on the dashboard. And the vehicles have no way of doing that. No ADAS system has the capability to warn the driver if it's been poorly recalibrated or not calibrated properly. So you need to get a plan for all three. All three are really important. And you need to ensure you are manage them effectively in your body shop, Michel.
Okay, that's a great idea. So I'm going to ask you guys, obviously, a few questions, as I always do. If someone listening today and watching us is feeling like they really need to get a plan together now, how should they get started and what should they do first? Robert, could you just give us an idea?
I would suggest when they come to do that, they need to invest quality time. This is not something you do in the evenings, at the weekends, at the end of the working day when you're tired. You need to schedule out quality time because this is a really important decision. And there are many choices, and all of them are expensive if you get them wrong. So you need to invest some quality time to do that. Sit down and do some proper analysis, starting with the end of the process. Where do you want your business to be with ADAS? What does that vision entail for you? And when that's in 2020 clarity and all of your management team are bought into that, then engineer the plan backwards to now to keep you on track towards your goal.
Okay, that's a good idea. Now let's look at some of the key factors that need to be included in the ADAS planning. Reinvestment. What should they reinvest in? How much will it cost? And how can they give themselves the best chance of a return on their investment? Adrian, you're the man who's invested a lot of money in your setup. Could you answer this idea?
Yeah, I think your key investments are primarily training. Invest in training. A lot of people fall foul of buying equipment, but then not getting trained. And often, a couple of hours with an equipment supplier showing you how to use the equipment doesn't give you a good, solid, fundamental understanding and knowledge of the systems that you're working on. So we need a good fundamental understanding. And then obviously investment in the correct equipment for the business and for the market that you're in. Not one system will give you the coverage that you probably want. So it's then a factor of investment versus expectation. So what are you expecting to do? What's your vehicle park like, and what are you expecting to do with that vehicle park based on what your investment is? It's easy to spend $60,000 or $70,000 down here in Australia and still not be able to do a lot of vehicles on our roads with our diverse vehicle park.
Okay, Andrew, you might answer this one. Competitor analysis. Does it matter really what the local competitors are doing? Or is it just do your own thing, doesn't matter?
Yeah, it does matter because this is part of the strategy, whether we want to go for a particular brand or even a particular model as specialized and then make our service tailored so that be it insurer or retail, they're going to come to us and not look at the competition. So there's an aspect of that. Probably more typically, we could begin by reflecting on the type of models and makes that flow through the shop over the past 2 or 3 years, then project that forward to say, okay, this is now younger models from the same manufacturer. Does that interest us? How is the coverage in the area? Is that manufacturer served by multiple body shops already? And then that reflects back on the kind of investment, because some manufacturers tend to stick with static calibration. Most mix it up so they can have all 3 types. And I think Adrian is absolutely right. There are aftermarket equipment solutions that typically can manage most vehicles that have been in production for 2 or 3 years, but they can't cope with newer stuff. And that's where it all comes down to strategy. As Robert said at the beginning, what do we want to do with the business? Where do we want to go? Do we want to specialize, or do we want to keep it general? And that all influences our investment. All
right. Andrew, you've explained that very well, but Adrian, I want to just touch on one thing, space. What options and choices should they consider? And I mean, briefly, without going too much, because I'm looking at the time and we're getting very close to our deadlines. But please, go ahead.
Yeah, number one is do we have the space to be able to do it before we embark on this project? Do we have the suitable space around us? Do we have spare space? It's often overlooked, and we need a lot of space to do these calibrations. Typically, I'll bark out figures like 12 to 15 meters by 7 to 8 meters to be able to do a calibration. I'll use a Mazda CX-9 as an average vehicle front radar calibration. The vehicle is over 5 meters in length, bumper to bumper. The apparatus needs to be set up 5 meters in front of the vehicle, and then there needs to be a space clear in front of the apparatus of several meters. We're up to a 15-meter bay in length. How many places have got a 15-meter bay that is perfectly level, unhindered, well lit, and suitable for calibration?
Wow, okay. Robert, I'm going to go on to you and ask you about the training. How can a shop ensure that training is worthwhile and not wasted?
I think they need to approach the training with a long-term view and an investment in mind. This is no longer going to be a tick box for some sort of work provider or standard where you can just send anybody on there to get some sort of printed A4 certificate that says we've got someone who's passed that course. Look at your younger staff. Look at the people that can build a career around this technology and this ADAS calibration. Our best technicians in MG Cannon are our younger technicians with ADAS. They are so comfortable, so involved with the technology and with the computerization of this recalibration. They are set for fabulous careers in the motor industry, and they'll be very much valued and sought after. So see it as a long-term view. Don't just send a body to tick a box. That's not going to give you the return at all.
I mean, let's face it, this is the future. I mean, whether we like it or not, I don't think electronics are leaving our cars anytime soon. Everything is going to be very electronically done. So, all right. The best part, Andrew, you like that part, profitability. What price and cost considerations help you make a profitable choice?
So that really wraps up what we've just gone through, which is if we've got the sums right, we've got a throughput through the ADAS area, if it's a static area, or we've devoted time to dynamic road testing as a specific calibration exercise over and above the end of exercise road testing. If it's working, then that's an integral part of the business, and we're able to charge for those skills. It's as valid as straightening out a fender. I think that's the test, is that if this is all working, then it's an integral part of the business. It's not a drag. It's not a subsidy in order to get smash repairs. Long way around. That's the tricky part, is to keep the traffic flowing through the system. And I would say again that the expertise in diagnostics is way more than ADAS. And that's another avenue. It opens up the body shop market and adds to its range of skills.
Okay. Very, very briefly, Robert, contingency planning. What happens if they realize they've chosen the wrong strategy? What contingency plans are available?
The other options will still be available to you. If it was as easy that we got these strategy decisions right all the time, probably none of us would be on this webinar running body shops, Michel. So accept that this is a new technology. You can't go back into a history book and see how they used to do it in the 1990s or 1980s. This technology did not exist. So you are not going to get everything right all the time, but invest time in the strategy. Don't fall into the trap of implementation, of just feeling like you need to get on with it. I need to get on with it. My competitor down the road is doing this. I need to go and buy what they bought. That might be right for them, but it might not be right for you. Take the time, get the strategy right, and then give yourself the flexibility. Businesses get in trouble when they run out of choices. Give yourself choices, and you'll always be able to move with the market. As Andrew and Adrian have already said, technology is never going to be this slow ever again, never going to be less technical than it is now. And this is not the future of the motor industry. It will evolve again in future. So it's not a one-step process. Give yourself choices of the path forward.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to go to the poll now, and the live poll is a bit complex this time. So if you're a body shop, okay, so think about it if you're a body shop, or think about it whether you're a supplier, sort of. If you're a body shop, what strategies will your business employ to manage ADAS repairs? Will you invest in multi-brand expertise? Will you specialize and do just some brands in-house and subcontract everything else? Or just don't invest at all. Subcontract all ADAS repairs to mobile or remote providers. Now, if you're a supplier, what do you see your customers doing? From your point of view, how do you see the market happening? So please go to your poll questions. And after that, we go to a very brief comment from our panelists, and then we will go into a Q&A. And I just need to remind everyone that this webinar would not have been possible without the support of our sponsors, 3M Australia, Anest Iwata Australia, Hella Gutmann, ProSpot Australia, and Sherwin Williams Automotive Refinishes. So I'm going to have a quick look now and see how the polls are going. What do we got? See, okay. All right, Robert, you're going to have to help me with this one because this one is not coming through every time as I go and check. So,
no problem, Michel. I read the answers to you. The results presently are: what strategy will your business employ to manage ADAS repairs? 38% said that they will invest and acquire multi-brand expertise. 33% said that they won't invest. They'll subcontract all of their ADAS repairs to remote providers. And only 29% said they would specialize, do some brands in-house and subcontract the rest.
All right. So, Robert, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the top two answers are that they are either going to invest in this multi-brand expertise and look to do these in-house, or subcontract everything. It seems to be more of a black and white answer than a grey answer of specialising in the middle.
Okay, Adrian.
I think some key words that I'm gonna leave the audience with is research, awareness, and training, and it's something that everybody needs to do. You need to research the market, understand it, make yourself aware, and get some training.
And Andrew, your thoughts?
I think it really reflecting on what Robert and Adrian had just said. It's sense it costs sense to think and to research. Whereas if we just go into spend mode without the thinking, usually it costs a lot more to then correct if we haven't got the strategy right. So investment in strategies is paramount.
All right, gentlemen, that's been amazing. Now I'm going to go through the questions, and I would let Robert pick some of the questions because he's always good at just picking who asks what and where and how. I've got them here in front of me. But Robert, would you like to pick the most picked question out of all the questions here today, and get you to start with the answer?
Okay, Andrew, I can see you've already replied to the latest question from Jeff Smith about ADAS as we see it today. So in the beginning, where do we see it going in the next 5 years? This is all about starting with ADAS and technology, Andrew. So where do you see it going from here? What technology are we yet to see? What do you think is still down the line?
Already, the sensor and system manufacturers are offering to vehicle manufacturers systems that are able to adapt automatically. So in other words, they're sitting on the vehicle and they figure out what's going on around them almost by themselves. We've seen some instances of that being introduced on rear radar modules. No one has introduced that on the forward-facing units yet. That is really tricky, and this is why I gave Jeff a partial answer. It's really tricky because between government and manufacturers, everybody's very nervous about introducing a system that is effectively thinking for itself in the absence of geofencing, in other words, the beginning of autonomy. So I think 5 years, we're going to see warranty will drive. In other words, when it becomes mandatory, when it's mandated, it's a legal requirement to fit ADAS on a vehicle, those features then become warranty items. And I think that's the point where things like static calibration and other labor-intensive activities will fade away. That, of course, will only affect the very newest vehicles as and when that happens. And I think there's a lot of resistance from vehicle manufacturers and governments to finally do it. That's where we're at.
All right, I'll pick on from here. Obviously, I'm going to go through the questions. George Discala asked, on a basic level, what skills required to be able to competently complete the calibration, and what are the costs and time a shop should need to invest to be able to do this in-house? Adrian, would you mind answering that particular one?
Yeah, the skills that are often overlooked here are diagnostic skills, diagnostic capabilities. Like I say, it's not like fitting a windscreen. It's not a windscreen business where we have what I class as a clean calibration, where we remove a piece of glass, refit a new piece of glass, put the camera back on. That's a clean calibration. What could possibly go wrong? In the case of a smash repair vehicle, there's a lot of potential for things to go wrong. And that's what I would class as a dirty calibration. And that is often overlooked. Like I've said numerous times during this webinar, People are falling into the trap of thinking that this is a simple point and shoot, stand up a reflector or a target and point and shoot, and everybody's happy and it's easy money. That's not the case.
So I really need to know, I've got to answer that question, what are the costs and times the shop would need to invest to be able to do this? Have you got a rough idea of the percentage figures or something?
No, it really does. It does depend on the skill set in the shop, as to are we upskilling somebody from ground zero, or have we got somebody in the shop who's already relatively competent and just needs to get some additional skills in his skill set? It's such an open-ended question, a difficult one to answer.
All right. I'm going to go to another question here. Murray Howell from Sherwin-Williams asking, if the vehicle equipped with ADAS is involved in an accident, when is it deemed not safe to drive? Is it only if the vehicle shows fault signs on the dash?
Nope.
Or if the vehicle has a front end hit and the bumper bar and its sensors have moved from their original positions when the vehicle is not safe to drive? Which one is it? Is it when you get the lights on or when you physically have the
No, physically. The latter. Definitely the latter. I have a front end impact, whether it's heavy or light. Let's say it's light and the vehicle's still driving. Potentially the radar is now pointing in totally the wrong direction. It can be 2 degrees out, it can be 10 degrees out, and I can no longer rely on that radar. So therefore my AEB and my ACC are all compromised. Everything on the front of that vehicle is then compromised. So not safe to drive.
Okay. One more question from Nadia Schneider. She's asking, and this is probably Andrew's little department here, does every vehicle manufacturer have already ADAS repair instructions available? What does the body shop do if there are no calibration specifications from the OEM?
Okay, so the answer is yes, vehicle manufacturers do publish ADAS repair instructions. I appreciate the difficulties that Australia faces, but Thatcham, I'm going to mess up saying this, but is it VACC? Have I got that right? And,
you got it right.
And us, Ezi-Methods. There are other providers who can help with that. The bottom line is, if there isn't an instruction, the body shop can't make it up. There has to be an instruction. So if that is the case, if there's a blank, and we have come across this situation, it's to hand it back to the dealer and say, okay, you're representative of this manufacturer. Manufacturer doesn't appear to be supporting this product. Help. And that's a very interesting conversation, by the way. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. So most manufacturers that say a system needs to be recalibrated do publish information about it. And I do appreciate that it's not easy to get hold of that information in Australia.
Okay, got a couple more questions. Are insurance companies aware of the additional complexities of the repairs to vehicle fitted with ADAS? And what are the problems that we're encountering in this situation? This is about from Jeff Smith.
I'll take over, Michel.
Sorry, Robert. I meant to say Robert, my apologies.
No problem at all. I'll take that, Michel. I partly answered that earlier in our discussion, but I think what I am starting to see around the world is dialogue between vehicle manufacturers and insurance companies. We're starting to see training organizations run open days for engineers where they're getting insurance engineers in and they are educating them about the systems and how they work and what is required for a safe and accurate repair. So, we all have an interest in this. We're all key stakeholders, whether you're a body shop, an insurance company, manufacturer, or a dealer, customer, it doesn't matter. We're all stakeholders in this process, and we shouldn't be waiting for someone else to do it for us. We should all get involved doing the right thing. It's as simple as that. We should all do the right thing. Andrew.
Just to quickly add to what Robert said, insurers are trying to understand, because ADAS potentially mitigates their risk. So they have a vested interest in understanding. And reflecting on what Robert's saying, I'm glad the situation is changing, because there was a relatively poor relationship between insurers and vehicle manufacturers, which meant that frequently underwriters didn't understand what they were underwriting. That's quite a common position. So I'm glad that's changing. That helps us all, literally everybody, from the vehicle user right through the whole system.
I got two more questions, and Andrew, this one is to you. Will the systems ever be able to self-calibrate?
Okay, so Adrian, I know you want to come in on this because bottom line is it will calibrate as a system, and I believe it's going to need an external resource. So the vehicle needs to communicate with something outside, possibly other vehicles, in order to understand really what's going on around it. And that's what I meant by geofencing. And that kind of leads into SAE level 2, level 3, and beyond autonomy. So this is transient. We are on the first step of something that is coming through, whether we like it or not. So yes, it could come, but there's a lot of caveats. And somewhere along the line, at state level and federal level, there has to be an agreement that, yeah, we will accept this risk. So that's the roadblock. That's what's holding it back. The technology is available, is not being fitted to vehicles right now, except in the case of rear radar, which is low risk. Yeah, it's coming.
Adrian, did you want to say anything on that one?
Yeah, I think, we need to consider that this is a global challenge too, and not every country has the same infrastructure, and we already face challenges here in Australia. For example, I don't have to go too far west to find roads with very few signs, no white lines, and even vehicles that are dynamically calibrated will not and cannot calibrate. So I'm at odds with this, to be honest with you. I think the dynamic calibration in itself is a problem. And I think sooner manufacturers realise that, the better. And the other thing I'm at odds with is as we head more in the direction of autonomy, there needs to be more accountability. So I think it's a very, very dangerous position.
Andrew.
Just to finally say that having outlined, and I think it's coming, it's just very interesting that the German auto manufacturers, which tend to work together, are sticking resolutely to the ability to statically calibrate ADAS. And I think that's very telling, because they've run pilot schemes with geofencing around most of the German cities for some years. So they have probably the most advanced setup outside of North America. And the auto industry is saying, okay, this is the engineered solution. It's static calibration. It's just an interesting observation. New model after new model, there's static calibration for forward-facing sensors.
Cool. Yeah.
All right, somehow we've lost Andrew, but it says because of his bandwidth is a bit sort of a weak. Anyway, I have one last question, and that question is actually to Robert, even though he's probably the one on the outside. Will vehicle manufacturers ever agree on a common system that everyone uses? I know we all got to laugh about it, and I can tell you the answer. It's no, but I'd like to hear from you guys. So, Robert, very quickly before we just lock up.
I think it's all our hope and our aspiration and our wish that they would, and it's not just with ADAS, it's with lots of other equipment and specifications as well. Sadly, I don't think that will be the case, Michel. There are different strategies within vehicle manufacturers, strengths and weaknesses in different markets around the world, and I think it's just going to be too complex for that ever to happen. Okay,
thank you for that one. Now, gentlemen, before we close the program, and I really thank you so much for all that help, can I have a 30-second summary from each one of you about your takeaway from today's discussion? Could we start with Adrian, please?
Yeah, I think the poll figures were quite telling, particularly here in Australia. I think it is an interesting market. We have a very diverse vehicle park, and this is a serious challenge for everybody in the industry. It'll be interesting to see what the next few years brings.
Awesome. Andrew?
I think this is really the beginning of a journey for a lot of people. Anybody who's not already in this, it's going to add a huge layer of skill to the shop. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity. Not without risk, but a huge opportunity.
Okay. Robert?
If you own a body shop, ADAS is going to be like your toothbrush at home. You're going to need to use it a minimum twice a day. If you don't use it minimum twice a day, it's going to cause you discomfort, pain, and later expense. So come off of this webinar and take some action. we're probably a little bit further down the path than some people with ADAS. So if anybody wants more information about the regulation here in the UK and how we manage ADAS or our experiences in our body shops, just leave your email in the chat or get hold of me on LinkedIn and I'll gladly help further.
That sounds wonderful. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your support today. I really appreciate it very much, and I hope everybody will join us on our next webinar towards the end of October. We'll give you the dates as time comes in. Meanwhile, I'll hand over back to Albert.
Thank you, Michel. And that brings us to the end of the first ever BodyShop News webinar. So I would like to thank our panelists for what was an amazing, insightful discussion. So a big thank you to Robert Snook from BSG Global, MG Cannon and IBIS, Andrew Marsh from Ezi-Methods, Adrian Parks from ADAS Solutions Australia, and of course our moderator and BodyShop News publisher, Michel Malik. And thanks to all of you, our audience, for coming today to participate. Our next webinar is currently scheduled for Thursday, 28 October at 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So we do hope we'll see you again for another insightful discussion. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, 3M, Anest Iwata, Hello Gutmann Solutions, ProSpot, and Sherwin-Williams Automotive Finishes. It wouldn't have been possible to bring you all of this today without their support. We're planning to put this webinar up on our website so you can watch it again at a later date. Just go to bodyshopnews.net/webinars in a few days' time to watch it again. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Everyone.